Hey guys, Anime Fanfics here. This is chapters 35 to 38 of Obito's redemption story by Yabai Assassin on Wattpad. Links to all stories are in the description below, and make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. Chapter 35. The hospital of Konoha was a relatively quiet and relaxed place. A far cry from how chaotic it was from the attack during the Chunin exams and the weeks that followed after. It had taken a considerable amount of effort from the leader of the hospital, Rin Noara, to get it like this. It was estimated to take years to recover. Speaking of Rin, she was currently in the middle of getting information on the battle injuries that a new patient of hers sustained. Turned out it had been Shursui who had been through a bit of surgery that was now healing while she was at home. She was surprised that they hadn't called her in to help, and when she asked about it they told her she needed some rest. What type of fight was he in to sustain injuries like these? She asked herself as she read off his injuries, walking to his room. Burnt and broken arm and ankle, severe chakra exhaustion, slight concussion, mild blood loss, and his chakra network were in shambles, to say the least. He certainly had a story to tell after all of this, but what she wondered is who could do something like this to Shursui. Not a lot of people. Itachi, you're here as well? Rin asked as she walked into the room to see Itachi sitting on the chair beside Shursui's bed. Itachi turned to her. Yes, I am. Will I be in your way? I can step out until you leave. She shook her head as she walked over to him. No, you're fine. I heard in the report that you saved him, so I was wondering who could have done something like this to him. He's one of the strongest shinobi in the village. Itachi turned back to Shursui, hearing his light and steady breathing before he answered. It was the Akatsuki. The organization after the tailed beast. Rin's eyes widened and shook. They were after tailed beast? They must don't know how dangerous one could be, and now they were after all of them. But Shursui has no tailed beast inside of him, so how come they attacked? Itachi closed his eyes, going over the conversation he had with Shursui just after the battle. He told me that he found a base of theirs. One that harbored S-class secrets that I need to tell Shikaku before I tell anyone else. I don't know if we have any listeners. His eyes briefly looked out the window, his body tensing up as if he was waiting for an enemy to spring through. For some reason, he had FR that their conversation was being listened to by someone. Must be important then. Rin mumbled as she went to check Shursui's vitals on the heart monitor as well as the other machines present. Izumi will definitely scold him when he wakes up. She chuckled a bit as light from the sun first started to show. It seemed like daytime was starting. Sighing, the soon-to-be leader of the Uchiha stood up and headed for the door. This information needs to get to the Hokage. If we plan to attack this hideout with the Hokage's orders, then you will most likely be informed since you're a Jonin. Rin nodded, content with the answer. Okay, make sure you get to the Hokage's office. I'll take care of Shursui, so don't worry. Thank you, big sis. I'll be careful as well. Saying that, the Uchiha shut the door behind him quietly while Rin started her examination on Shursui. As Itachi walked down the hallway, he wondered what was Danzo planning. The Uchiha hadn't liked him since the massacre but hadn't trusted him since he was a child. Obito had warned him to be careful around Danzo, and now the elite shinobi could see why. Whatever was being planned against Danzo, he hoped it would work. His mind then drifted over to the conversation he had with Izumi just hours ago. Flashback. Itachi was waiting in the lobby of the hospital, waiting to hear on Shursui's condition. He didn't know how long he had waited, but hoped it wouldn't be much longer. He was worried. He knew firsthand how strong Shursui was. Heck, he was stronger than him. He was worried just because of the fact that he didn't look good when he saved him. In fact, Itachi put him to sleep with genjutsu so he could stop feeling the pain of his injuries. In his mind, he was hoping for it to not be really serious, but realistically he knew that it was most likely worse than what he thought. Itachi, is that you? A soft but urgent voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see Izumi jogging up to him, her face a bit troubled. Seeing her face, he asked, "What's the matter, Izumi?" "I should be asking you that," she retorted, reaching him and bending down to eye level. Why the heck are you in here? Is everything okay? I'm fine, he answered after a brief pause. The Akatsuki members and their abilities were on his mind. The fact that they beat Shisui and weren't using their full abilities, Shisui's words, surprised him. Something told him that they weren't the only members and they also weren't the strongest. I'm here because of Shisui. Shisui? She asked surprisingly before her face turned deadpanned. Let me guess, he set himself on fire with one of his jutsu again. No, Itachi answered with a shake of his head. Then did he teleport into a beehive or something? She asked, remembering a time where he was just learning his favorite jutsu and did that. Though she couldn't imagine him making that mistake again. No. Did he get some girl pregnant? This was going to be her last question. No, not that either. He responded, but he was a bit surprised at the unexpected question. He was pretty sure Shisui hadn't done that yet. Shisui could never keep secrets from him after all. What makes you think that? She shrugged her shoulders, her face shone a bit amusement on it. It was better than her troubled face she walked in with. It was just a thought, nothing more. But, seriously, what's going on with him? Itachi paused and sighed. He's injured pretty badly. I haven't gotten what the doctors think, but from my observations it doesn't look like he'll die, but he might be out of being a shinobi for a while. Oh, her head dropped as she sat down beside him. What happened? Do you remember the organization after Tailed Beast? She nodded and he continued after. The Akatsuki. He was fighting 3 of them at once because he came across a base of theirs. A top secret one at that. S-class. S-class, huh? Both her face and voice went back to a more serious tone. What did he find inside? Did he tell you? He did. Itachi confirmed. Shisui wanted to tell him so someone else knew in case he was attacked or killed. Good thing it was told to someone as strong as Itachi. He was stronger than some Kage. But I won't tell you here. His voice turned a bit wary, not trusting their open location. I don't want someone eavesdropping. We don't want a panic to arise, nor do we want an enemy getting a hold of this information. Yeah, that makes sense. She turned away to stare at her feet. The worry she had for Shisui had made her forget what she came to talk about in the first place. You came for something. The mature Uchiha's voice broke through her thoughts. What was it? I've talked enough as is. His tone turned a bit more light. Shisui's condition was bothering him a bit, it seemed. Oh, yeah. She chuckled a bit at her forgetfulness before her face turned serious and a bit on the sour side. Itachi had took note of that. Can you tell me everything you saw when you reported about Danzo? When we arrived to the daimyo, he was nowhere to be found and everything looked good. I even checked the area for genjutsu, but I didn't find anything. Itachi turned thoughtful as his mind replayed the events that happened earlier that day before answering. I didn't see much. He admitted, in fact, I wasn't there for long. I was only able to see that ambush that they were about to put in motion. This was the point when he started to feel disappointed in himself. Yes, he could have helped the daimyo get to safety and get rid of Danzo for good if he would have sat Shisui down. But that wasn't what really made the teen disappointed. It was the fact that he potentially sacrificed the life of the daimyo for his friend. He hadn't even thought to see if the daimyo had even survived. Before he could criticize himself any longer, he felt a hand touch his face softly. He brought his face up to see that it was Izumi's hand. Stop criticizing everything you do. And don't tell me you aren't. I know you. She said tenderly, rubbing his stress lines gently. You'll get more wrinkles. I'm sorry. You were worried about Shisui's safety, right? Sensei always told us to never abandon our comrades, even if it's for a mission. What you did was right. There is no need for any criticism. Besides, the daimyo is safe, so everything worked out. Hearing that, Itachi closed his eyes, unconsciously leaning into her soft hand. Thank you, Izumi. I'm worried too, so you're not alone. But Shirsue's strong, he'll be back in his feet in no time, creating jutsu to sync with the body flicker. Her words were comforting. He felt better, a lot better. He found solace in her words as he sighed in thought. As he did, her hand moved from his face to his back as she pulled herself to him for a hug. "Ai Izumi?" She talked as her hands went to work in untying his forehead protector. "Nobody's perfect, I know that. But, I want you to try to stop that bad habit of yours. It's been like this since that time." His body went still at the mention of what he did, who he killed during the Uchiha massacre. No more self-criticism. We can't change what happened back then. But what we can do is move forward and look towards the future. That is what your parents would want. By that time, the forehead protector he had on was gone and she moved from her place above his shoulder to look him in the eye. This time she took Itachi's face with both her hands. She kissed him softly. "Don't have any regrets. Look towards the future." Flashback over. He touched his lips at the memory, slight embarrassment rising up inside of him. Why did she kiss him? They were close friends sure, but he didn't know that she had feelings for him at all. Did he have feelings for her? Maybe. He didn't reject the kiss, hadn't disliked it either. Rather, he actually enjoyed it, which surprised him since he honestly had no interest in the many women that chased after him. Man, his mind was in a weird place, a really weird place. He most definitely needed some advice. "And maybe I should ask Sensei," he said quietly, half in thought and still embarrassed. Like a Nara would say, this is troublesome. Triple X. Saying that Izumi was in the same league with Itachi on their previous encounter was an understatement. Even though it was hours ago, the memory of what she did embarrassed her so badly that she hadn't come close to the Uchiha compound and had spent the night at Anko's. Sasuke had a key so she knew he'd be fine, but she did regret not giving him a note to say where everyone was. Currently she was in Anko's room fixing her hair in the mirror and checking her face. There were small bags under her eyes which were barely noticeable, but she couldn't go to sleep last night. It plagued her mind that bad. "You still using the mirror, or what?" The voice startled her, which caused to inhale her spit. That sent her into a coughing fit as she hit her chest to calm down. When it settled, she slowly turned to see Anko, paused in the middle of drying her hair to give her a questionable look. A blush of embarrassment tinged on her cheeks. "Are you okay? You've been jumpy since you've wanted to come visit." Her voice didn't at all hide the way she was questioning the actions of her temporary roommate. "Why yeah, I'm fine," she said a bit shakily, the embarrassment still in full effect. "I'm just, she trailed off to look for an excuse of some kind, but Anko had gave her one. "On your period?" Yes, she registered the question and grew flustered. "No, I mean no. It's not that." Anko gives a wry smile before laughing in amusement. Whatever got her flustered sure made her look funny, and Anko needed a good laugh. Once she calmed herself, she continued to dry her hair before once again talking. "So, what's got you so flustered? You look like a fangirl talking about their crush." "Well, she stammered. "Can you promise not to tell anyone?" She managed to squeak out the words quickly to avoid stuttering. Damn, she probably looked like an idiot. Anko's response was raising an eyebrow. Did she kill someone or something? She had been jittery and nervous all night, but she chose to ignore it because of the fact that she needed sleep. She did stay to hear Shikaku's plan to deal with Danzo. "What's this all about?" she asked simply. She was getting curious, she couldn't lie. "Did you kill someone?" "No, and besides I wouldn't be like this," she paused and gestured to herself. "If I killed someone." "Okay," Anko said slowly. "Then why are you like that? Will you tell anyone?" she asked softly, fidgeting with her hair. "I really don't trust you not to." "I won't tell anyone, okay?" She held her hand up in mock surrender before gesturing for Izumi to continue. Izumi was silent at first, thinking to herself on how she was going to say this without sounding weird or being embarrassed. After searching for the right word, she decided to just straight up say it and deal with everything else later. Anko promised not to tell, not that she trusted her to keep that, so she might as well get it done. She stuttered before getting the rest of it out, accidentally yelling. I kissed Itachi. Anko was quiet after the confession, not showing any emotion but not particularly blank in the face. That was before she all but screamed, yes. She started laughing as she went to hug Izumi. Ha! That jackass Kakashi owes me money. What? Izumi asked confusingly, now looking at Anko. Her embarrassment had finally seemed to pass along with her nervousness. It seemed she just needed to let it out rather than keep it in. That wasn't to say she wasn't scared Anko would say something. She definitely was. Everyone had known you two liked each other for a while now, so we all placed bets to see if you would get together. She explained, not going a bit faster around her room to get dressed as her hair was almost dry. Of course I was on the side who said you guys would get together while Kakashi wasn't. I can't wait to see his face when I tell him. But you just said you wouldn't. Izumi pouted, already knowing this was going to happen but couldn't help but feel a little upset. I know, but this is different. She exclaimed, reaching for her money that was all over her dresser before holding it up. It's for money. And it's from Kakashi's all-knowing ass, so it's worth it. It's not worth my embarrassment. XXX. Konoha Intelligence Division. Ibiki Marino was currently walking through a corridor, walking past multiple doors that were empty, and that were in use holding prisoners from Suna's invasion and people suspected of being involved with Orochimaru. As Ibiki walked, he had his top men walk behind him, currently giving out orders for him if anyone were to pass by. His mind was currently on the files he received from both Shikaku and his men who would do examinations while he finished other prisoners. Now it was time for him to examine them himself personally. Personally, he didn't like Danzo, always thinking that he was plotting or too secretive to be as high as he was in Konoha's government. But his suspicions were rarely off, and this situation he found himself in only proved that. Danzo had a secret military force that followed his word to the letter. Then he not only went after one of the top ninjas in the village but tried to steal his eye. Now what was weird was how painfully obvious his approach was. He couldn't name too many people alive that could defeat Kakashi, let alone kill him. Most of them were in this village and others were some he wouldn't come across, but besides that Danzo sent some of his route after him. The question was, what would he try to do with such an obvious approach? When Ibiki exited his thoughts, he was nearing the door he was waiting for. Guards stood on both sides of the metal door, still as statues and ready for just about anything to happen at any given moment. When he reached the door, they nodded at him and he and his men went inside the room. The room they walked into was one of the most expensive and least used one. It was only for special cases and was used for only that. It was a room that was cut off from each other mostly, only connecting with each other by a metal door. On one side were where interrogators would sit and discuss things about this special case. They had technology and instruments used for torture where the desk was, and above that was a large one-way mirror. They could also hear anything on the other side of the glass, while anyone on the other side wouldn't be able to hear them unless they turned on the microphone. Control everything in here, Ibiki ordered, not stopping his gate to the door that would connect to the other side. His men nodded and followed orders as he entered the room. The door closed behind him just as he walked in front of the prisoner, which revealed to be the leader of the Root members who attacked Kakashi. The former Root member's eyes had been following Ibiki ever since he entered the room. He had been seated in a metal chair that felt like the smooth metal of kunai and shuriken all ninjas used. It had been a bit uncomfortable, but when you're a ninja mist, things are like that anyway. Even if it wasn't, he hadn't showed emotion in so long that he simply thought he had none. Some integrators were convinced he didn't. The member watched as Ibiki went inside his black coat slowly, thinking it would be some sort of weapon. He resigned himself to fate, before he took out a folder and tossed it on the small table between them. He watched the folder slide to him, unable to move because of the binds that stuck him in the chair. "What's your name?" Ibiki asked evenly, his face unreadable. Neither of the men had names on records and none of them provided a name when asked. Ibiki wasn't actually interested in his name, the fact was unimportant, but what he wanted to see was the man's demeanor to determine how he would do this. Questions like these would help. The unnamed man kept silent, simply staring with no emotion on his face. The look would certainly put lower ninja on edge, but know someone with Ibiki's experience. To him, it looked like the man was either avoiding the question or not be cooperative. You didn't seem to hear me, so I'll repeat. His voice this time came out a bit authoritative, putting emphasis on the last part of his sentence. He wasn't keen on repeating to someone who could hear. What is your name? Once again the man didn't respond and showed no amount of emotion in both body language or facial expression. A model shinobi had come to Ibiki's mind as he thought about the rules of a shinobi. After a moment of staring and saying nothing, Ibiki's face softened a bit before he chuckled lightly. He got up from his seat and walked around the table, all the while the man's eyes followed until he was completely behind him. It seems that you aren't keen on talking. His voice this time was much more firm, contradicting the chuckle just before. But talking isn't the only way to get you to talk. I'm sure you've heard of my unit, you hail from Konoha like us, do you not? We specialize in making shinobi like you squeal, and you'll be no different. At that point, Ibiki was holding up a hand sign, which was a signal to his men on the other side to show the true purpose of the chair that their prisoner was sitting in. The man kept silent and still-faced, feeling the chair tense up before activating. Being so close now that the chair was on, he could feel the chakra swimming through it as if it were a kunai. The chair heated up a bit, making the back of his head, back thighs, shoulders, and arm get a bit hotter. He could feel that it was the chair and now knew that this would be the way he was tortured. But for now the heat was bearable. I noticed you moved uncomfortably in your seat. The voice had again changed, this time a bit mockingly but still firm. It was obvious he was taking advantage of what he caused to happen. I was under the impression that it was the most comfortable we had. Sorry for the inconvenience. What's your name? Ibiki asked once more after the slight mocking. The threat of what would happen if he didn't answer was made very clear by the heat of the chair. I don't have one, was the simple monotone answer he received. You don't have one? Ibiki repeated as he walked back into the unnamed shinobi's view, sitting back down in his seat across from the shinobi. His voice sounded like he didn't believe that at all as he looked the shinobi dead in the eye, saying, I don't believe you, but let's say I do. How come you don't? He once again said nothing for the longest time. Other interrogators would have probably lost their patience, but Ibiki wasn't one of those. It seemed to be a good thing when the root member held out his tongue, showing a seal with 5 black lines with 2 being separated at the end. A seal? Ibiki questioned, looking at it with curiosity. At best he was a novice with seals and didn't know too much about them, but from what he could tell it looked like a restriction seal. It had other things laced in it that the experienced shinobi couldn't decipher, but he was sure it had something to do with Danzo. I'm to assume that this seal is one Danzo placed and it'll prevent you from talking about him? He asked as the unnamed shinobi put his tongue back in his mouth. Once again he gave no reply, only staring into the eyes of Ibiki, secretly hoping he'd get the hint. The heat of the chair had now worked its way past his clothes and was currently burning his skin, which caused him immense discomfort and slight pain. Also barely any root held actual loyalty to Danzo, only following his orders through blackmail, emotion, and other abnormal treatment. I'll take your word for it, he said, getting up and turning to the glass, nodding. That was the signal for his men to deactivate the chair, which they followed and did so immediately, relieving the unnamed shinobi. Of course, if this information turns out to be wrong, then consequences will be administered. It could even be the execution of one or more of your team, remember that. With that warning given, the torture expert picked up the file on the table and left the room shortly after, leaving the other alone in the dark room. When on the other side his men turned to him. Do you think it's a good idea to just believe him? One of them asked. Maybe we should check with Inoichi-san to be sure. That's where I'm going. The expert answered curtly, walking past both of them and to the door. I need one of you to go and inform Shikaku of what we found and also to get Master Jiraiya to come take a look at that seal. Then I want the other to check the other route for the seal and keep things over here running smoothly. I'll be gone for a while today." "Yes, sir." The both responded, and he left the room as the two started on their tasks. In the other, equally large part of the intelligence division was Inoichi Yamanaka, walking down the corridor while processing the information he received from probing a root member's mind. What he got was truly shocking, to say the least. The first thing was that Danzo was taking kids from clans and using them for his own gain, and if he was going through what the root member he probed, then he also killed someone close to them to cut off their emotions. It was despicable in his eyes, and he couldn't help but think of what would have happened to Ino. The only clan that had yet to lose any members would be the Hyuga and the Uchiha. The Hyuga because of how they watch their own, and the Uchiha because of just how many are left and how strong those that are left. His mind went back to the seals he saw Danzo plant on his route. It prevented them from talking about him or the organization in any way, and if they did they'd be paralyzed. It was a truly sick way to keep information, but Inoichi couldn't say that it wasn't effective. If only he wasn't a part of the intelligence division, then Danzo might have gotten away with it. Just as he was about to enter his office, a firm voice called out to him. "Inoichi, I need you to confirm something for me." Inoichi turned to see that it was Ibiki, and nodded, opening his door. "Of course, come inside for a bit." Ibiki nodded, and two went inside and got comfortable. Inoichi's office had folders on his desk which sat in the end of the room. Behind it on the wall was a board with writing and records on it and a couch that finished things off to the side. "What do you need me to confirm?" he asked as they both sat on the couch, getting comfortable. "I was able to get my target to talk as usual." Ibiki started looking down into his lap and thought. Inoichi became curious as he knew that each member had a seal that prevented them from speaking of them of the organization. However, before he could ask, Ibiki guessed what he was about to say from his look alone. "What I meant by talk is I'm assuming based off what the captive implied." "Implied?" The Yamanaka head thought aloud. He thought that it would extend to all forms of communication, but it seemed that there were loopholes around the block. "Convenient." "I asked him what was his name," Ibiki started, recalling what happened just a few minutes prior. "I wanted to see how he'd react to both normal questions and hard ones, but he barely answered this one. Eventually, I got him to talk, and he told me that he had no name. Naturally, I was disbelieving but entertained the idea and asked him how come. His response, he folded his hands in front of him, leaning over a bit in posture. Was holding out his tongue. When he did, I could clearly see that it was a seal for restraint, but my knowledge of seals is rather inadequate to accurately confirm the full purpose of the seal." Inoichi nodded. He too wasn't that experienced with seals but knew their purpose and shared as much. "I was going through the memory of our target when I saw Danzo giving a speech to all members. Of course, I stayed and checked it out only to see it was Danzo explaining the seal he would put on them and applying it to them." He explained, going through that particular memory as he slightly frowned. Some of his root were children about the same age as Ino. To think that they had to do something like that. That seal is for making sure that any information about him of the organization of root stays hidden. If any were to say anything, then it would paralyze them instantly. Ibiki said nothing at first, his stone face still remained. Effective method of keeping information. He praised lightly, but his eye narrowed a bit in anger. He knew Danzo wasn't to be trusted, and this all but proved it. The fact that the third Hokage let him do all this for so long was baffling to him. It also made him wonder if the council members were as dirty as Danzo. It wouldn't be a stretch of the imagination to say they are, and are planning something as they spoke. But unnecessarily cruel. "Have you contacted Master Jiraiya yet?" Ibiki turned to Inoichi as he continued to talk. "If both of us aren't that skilled with seals, then maybe we should bring him here to see if he could take the seals off. It could make gaining more information faster, as they have some strong mental blocks in place that are taking a bit long to decipher." Ibiki nodded, sitting straight to rest his back. "Yes, I've had some of my men go and retrieve him from Shikaku," he informed. "I don't know when he'll arrive, however." That's okay, thanks for telling me. Inoichi thanked before sighing tiredly and rubbing his heavy eyes. He hadn't been able to sleep for a bit and it was effective for him. If I find anything else of importance, I'll let you know. Shikako had some sort of plan cooked up, but I have told a messenger to give him the knee information I just received. He should have delivered it by now. Ibiki nodded, and with a small grunt got up from the couch. We both have a bit more work to do, so I'll leave first. Take care, Inoichi, and make sure anything you find has more than you knowing it. If Danzo decides to strike here, he could kill some of the only people with the information. Seeing he was right, Inoichi nodded as the man left shortly after. Inoichi sighed once again as he headed to his desk. Hopefully, the situation would be resolved shortly. XXX Hokage Office. Shikaku was known to be a man of many things. He was the Jonin commander, a lazy Nara, head of the Nara clan, and a world-renowned legend in shogi. But what most didn't know is that he was the head strategist of the Hokage when something important came up. With that in mind, one would think that he had a plan for almost anything, and they'd be right in saying that in most cases. This case, however, is very different from most. They were facing someone as sneaky as Danzo, and while Shikaku didn't like the guy, he couldn't deny that the man was smart and covered his tracks well. His plan was okay for him on a bad day, but it was the most he could come up with in the short time that he had to pee in and with the little information he had at the time. Hopefully, it could provide some positive results. Those are some pretty hefty changes to the original plan. Kakashi remarked after hearing the new plan right before the meeting that would decide the Hokage. The others in the room consisted of Asuma, Enko, Izumi, Obito, Jiraiya, Shoza, and Ganma, who all silently agreed to the statement. It was unlike Shikaku to change big parts of his plans just before it was to be started. But the situation was surely different this time around, so it wasn't as surprising. I know, but I received new intel from Inoichi and Ibiki. The Hokage sit-in explained, sighing from the mental exhaustion but keeping his serious expression. He couldn't afford to get tired when the future of Konoha depended on his decisions. I wanted to adjust my strategy accordingly. We can't have any holes in this plan. Doesn't it sound a bit weird though? Jiraiya thought aloud with a hand on his chin in thought, gaining the attention of everyone in the room. What? The plan? Anko asked. It sounded good to her, and the changes buffed out anything that could backfire. No, not that. This is about Danzo. Jiraiya answered before pausing to get his thoughts together. He had to be sure this made sense. Once he did, he asked, "Haven't you guys noticed his approach? It's so forward." That got everyone thinking, and they all agreed. Danzo wasn't one for showing himself like this, knowing they had Inoichi and Ibiki on their side. Do you think he let his men get captured on purpose? Izumi asked curiously as she turned to Jiraiya. Obito silently thought that it was indeed strange how he was forward and how very strange it was. Maybe he should have killed him after all. Political shock be damned. It's a possibility. Ganma stated, chewing on the sendan that never seemed to leave his mouth. Kakashi, how much of a fight did they put up? Kakashi hummed in thought before answering. I don't know if they were doing their best, but I can say that it wasn't easy to subdue them. Wow, that's helpful. Anko muttered, giving the one-eyed Jounin a deadpan look. Kakashi gave a lackluster shrug as an answer back, looking rather cool and nonchalant. Anyway, Gemma turned to Jiraiya. Master Jiraiya, could you continue? I'd like to hear what else you have to say. I've known about Danzo ever since Lord Third became my sensei. He was always sneaky, never coming out of the shadows unless he was doing something that needed it, and it remained that way till now. I'm not saying he can't make a mistake, but this is too much of one. Anyone else got any ideas? No one did, and the group continued to talk about other things, except Obito. In his thoughts, he was wondering what the old man was planning. Like Jiraiya said, this was out of character for him. The approach was simply too direct for it to be something he came up with. But even with his curiosity being lifted, he was still quite standoffish with the situation. He had no doubt the other could handle it since he had his own things to do. He had looked through the Uchiha registry and couldn't find any Uchiha that fit what he saw from his fight. There was no way he could have used a genjutsu to disguise his features since Obito was so close. Perhaps his name was erased from the registry, that was the theory the Uchiha went with. And it had to be Black Zetsu. Even now he was still as dangerous and manipulative as ever. The meeting for the Hokage was about to start when the ground shook violently shortly. It sent almost everyone in the room to the ground at the sheer force and surprise it got from everyone. "The fuck's going on?" Anko yelled, trying and failing to get to her knees. The only one who was still on their feet was Obito, and he was currently walking towards the window that showed the village. The Intelligence Division is on fire. Chapter 36. As soon as those words left Obito's mouth, the ground had stopped shaking as everyone made it to their feet hastily. They all ran to the large window to see the exact thing he yelled aloud, and their reactions varied slightly. For the most part, each of them felt shocked at what was happening, but each was quick to react being the experienced shinobi they were, and one by one rushed out of the window, using the rooftops to make their way to the fiery area. At the hospital, things were a bit more hectic considering they were a bit closer to the division than the Hokage office. The building, with the ground, shook violently as everyone inside fell from the impact. Patients on rolling stretchers or in the rehab section fell and broke limbs that were just about healed as the doctors and nurses watching them hit the ground. Patients in surgery died or got cut accidentally as the building shook, causing tools to cut where they weren't supposed to. All in all, things quickly got out of control. What's going on? Rin yelled out, losing her footing and falling from the ground. Before that, she was treating Shisui, who had been in a medically induced coma, so that he could heal. Thankfully, she had nothing sharp in her hand or he'd definitely been injured or worse dead. The shaking stopped as quickly as it began before she got up and checked on her latest patient. The machine that had been monitoring the Uchiha's heartbeat was off, along with other technology such as the lights. She put her head to his chest before sighing in relief. He was breathing just as he had before and his heartbeat was steady. Just as she finished her checkup, the door slammed open to reveal one of the top doctors in the hospital. "Nohara-san. Electricity in the building has shut down from whatever happened. Patients on life support are dying, and as well as patients who were in surgery. How do we proceed?" He looked clearly distraught and surprised, but his voice held firm as he delivered the information to the head of the hospital. Rin bit her lower lip as she thought about what to do. "I want our top men to go and stabilize as many as the critical patients as possible. In the meantime, nurses need to tend to any elder patients while other doctors make sure that patients with any damaged limbs are secure." The man nodded fast, ready to do as assigned. "Yes, he cut himself off with a gargled scream with a shrill tone. His face was one of shock as blood seeped from his mouth and his eyes rolled back in his head. Just a few meters down, Rin could see a kunai covered in dense chakra, piercing the doctor through his chest. The man leaned over before falling to the ground, unmoving as his killer made himself known with a smirk and a small chuckle. "This is my chance," he muttered out, his face holding a sadistic smile as blood leaked from the kunai onto the fresh corpse that was sprawled on the ground. "And I won't let it go to waste." Who the hell are you?" Rin roars after the shock wears off. That doctor had been one of the kindest and helpful people she'd ever met. She'd even had the pleasure of meeting his family, and now she'd have to tell them that he was dead. It caused her to be uncharacteristically angry. "That's not what I'd be asking in your situation," the gray-haired shinobi mused, walking slowly in the room. He tilted his head to the side, aiming to see past Rin. But she saw this and got in front of his view, not wanting him to see Shisui in his easily killable state. "Who's the patient behind you that you're protecting, Rin?" The way he said her name was almost enough to send a shiver down her spine. But once again she got angry, this time at the mention of Shisui, and she could tell he was going to use that to his advantage in whatever he wanted to do. She tried reaching behind her silently to take out a weapon but stopped when Kabuto called her out. "I wouldn't move anymore if I were you." He now held a kumai with an explosive tag attached to it. The threat he was making was painfully obvious, so she complied and put her hands back into view. She knew that before she could get a weapon he would have blown the room to bits, and she wasn't sure if Shui would survive such a thing. The question of what he wanted was running through her mind at the moment, but she refrained from asking, wanting to get the information from battle instead. That way she could have a slight advantage over her opponent when she figured it out and came up with a counterattack he soundly expects. As she thought about her next move, Kabuto started to walk forward and she freezes her thoughts to watch his movements. He was still holding up the kunai, using it as a clear threat of what would happen if she moved. I wonder if that's just another patient, or perhaps someone important to you. It's no one of concern, she stated bravely. What are you here for? Kabuto chuckled, amused at the situation. Underneath he was planning his own next move, wondering how could he go about kidnapping her as silently as possible. Of course, he could just use his earlier threat of blowing up the entire room to get what he wants, but that wasn't completely foolproof. He needed her alive and well so that when she was captured she could start treatment on Orochimaru as quickly as possible. If she was too injured then they'd have to wait for her to heal, which meant that Lord Orochimaru had to as well. Knowing that left him in his current predicament of not knowing how he would capture her. But he did know that if she caught wind of his intentions this could turn into a full-blown battle quickly. His opponent was thinking about the same thing, her next move, but also his. She knew that her next move would depend on what he would do next. Currently, the situation was very much under his control, but what stumped her was his intentions. It couldn't be to kill her. She could have already blown up the room with a kunai and disappeared before she could react. Now that she realized it, he couldn't be here for Shui either for that exact reason. So, that meant his intentions had to be either to kidnap her or kidnap Shui. The moment she realized this, the explosive kunai was thrown at her. He must have realized that I could easily figure out if I had time to think. She reasoned internally before grabbing the explosive projectile by its grip. As expected, the explosive tag glowed, signaling the start of its detonation. Quickly, the medic covered her hand in chakra, sucking the chakra from the explosive tag, stopping it from detonating. Simultaneously, Kabuto rushed her just as she finished disarming the kunai. She threw the kunai at him, but he inclined his head and dodged, not slowing down in his mad dash towards her. When he reached her she jumped over him and fled the room, causing him to give chase down the long corridor filled with hospital equipment. So, he's after me. Rin realized, turning her head slightly to see Kabuto chasing her. It was a gamble on her part, but now that she was sure of his intentions she could counterattack accordingly. Looking ahead, she saw the equipment in her way, so she jumped up and turned upside down, planting her chakra-laced feet onto the ceiling, and continued to run. Her senses screamed for her to move and she followed and leaped back to see the electrical heart monitors used for patients smashing into the ceiling. This was followed by Kabuto swinging his chakra scalpel horizontally, aiming to cut the heels of her feet as he pushed off the side of the wall. Seeing his movements, the medic reacts quickly, maneuvering her body and narrowly avoiding the strike, but this caused her to lose her position on the ceiling. That proved to save her as the ceiling got sliced into twos from Kabuto's attack and started to fall onto the floor. The debris split the two apart as Rin got up from her fall. He's stronger than I thought. I need to get out of this cramped space, she thought, looking at the sunlight that was now coming from the roof, giving her a better view of her surroundings. Unfortunately, it didn't light the entire corridor, showing with the abundance of blind spots that Rin had started to try and memorize. She didn't get a chance to finish as Kabuto made himself known by smashing through the window on her right and kicking her in the abdomen with all of the momentum he gained. She didn't expect him to go outside of the window on the other side of the debris to get to her, but nevertheless, it was an effective move as it had sent Rin into the wall on the other side of the corridor. Grunting, she fell from the wall that now had her outline forcefully etched upon it, which Kabuto took a bit of glee from seeing. By your movements, I can tell that you now know of my intention to kidnap you. He pushed his glasses up smugly, a grin of confidence and superiority on his face. Guess I underestimated your intelligence. As Kabuto made himself known by smashing through the window on her right and kicking her in the abdomen with all of the momentum he gained. She didn't expect him to go outside of the window on the other side of the debris to get to her, but nevertheless, it was an effective move as it had sent Rin into the wall on the other side of the corridor. Looking up, she sent him a look of defiance as she secretly reached into the ninja pouch on her leg. And with her position, she was sure he wouldn't be able to see her in time to dodge. "And I guess I overestimated yours," she yelled, crushing the smoke bombs she got from her pouch, which caused them to detonate in the small space. As Rin shot up and began to run out of the smoke through the other side of the corridor, the other room doors on the hallway opened with doctors and nurses peeking out, trying to see the commotion. They could only see Rin as she was the only thing through the smoke, and many of them asked various questions. "Rin-san, what's going on? Are you okay? What was all that commotion? Get inside the rooms and protect your patients," Rin ordered as she ran at them full speed, unknowing of Kabuto that had started to catch up with her. Reaching one of the doors, Rin opened it fully, slamming the door into his face. But this didn't stop the Sound Nin, who smashed through the glass part of the door and tightly gripped her neck. Half his face showed through the door from the glass. "No more running." Just after he said that, Rin, with effort, pulled her head back, causing Kabuto's head to smash into the broken parts of the window, cutting his face and drawing blood. She then whipped out a sunbon and stuck it into one of the pressure points in his arm, causing it to release her neck as it slumped down, now useless. But Kabuto recovered quickly, moving his arm from the door and circling it before Rin could react fully. But Rin had noticed something about this as he was about to punch her. "Kai!" she yelled internally, getting rid of the illusion clone. Behind the door, a crouched Kabuto calls out, "Earth-style, pillar combustion jutsu." The corridor the two are in suddenly changes to earth, leaving Rin surprised at what's going on. But she has no time to think as a pillar shot at her with incredible speed, so much that it would have knocked her out. She dodges by jumping back, her eyes watching as it passes her face and hit the wall beside her with incredible force. But she has no time to linger on it as more and more pillars of earth shot at her, every round increasing the number of how many. When 9 were shooting at her, she started to get overwhelmed as taijutsu and speed were not her forte. As she dodged constantly, her mind was running wild, trying to get any idea on how she could end this. She couldn't use any jutsu as that would definitely destroy the hospital or damage it, which was something they couldn't afford considering how they were just getting better after the many casualties of the invasion from Orochimaru and the Sand Village. She began to tire as the pillars kept increasing. She couldn't find anything she could do that wouldn't destroy the hospital. This is really bad. Sweat started to roll down her face as she constantly dodged the earth pillars. Her long hair was flying everywhere every time she turned her head to see and dodge the next pillar. Kabuto stood beside the broken door, smirking confidently at his work. He knew that the only way to escape the jutsu was using ninjutsu against it. And since she cared about the hospital so much, he knew it would not happen. This is really a shame. To see a kunoichi of your caliber fall in such a sad way. As he said that, he held up a hand sign. Suddenly, the pillars that were launching at her retracted back into the walls, giving Rin a bit of rest as she panted lightly. "Rin-san!" A medic Nin boldly stepped up to the fight, ready to try and help her superior despite the obvious danger. Seeing her courage, all of the other medic Nin on the hallway stepped up as well, showing their support. I am fine," she muttered tiredly. She was still panting slightly but was considerably better. Kabuto's smirk was still going strong, in fact, it probably was even more prominent. "Thanks, fools. You've all made my job even easier. Now, I don't have to search around for any witnesses." Saying that, what happened next was to be considered a slaughter. XXX. Unknown location. Looks like we made it in time. "I hate to keep people waiting," Sasori said. He was holding his partner Deidara atop his shoulder as he and Shin made their way into the hideout. Shin made a face. "You should really stop that. It doesn't look as good as it does without your puppet." "Shut up!" Sasori yelled, glaring at him. That was a bit of a sore topic at the moment. "Every time you talk doesn't look right, you know, teeth bastard." Shin huffed angrily but had no intention of continuing the topic. Just shut the hell up and go inside. You'll keep everyone waiting. Sasori grumbled under his breath, but said nothing as the two went inside the base. Inside, all Akatsuki members had assembled except for Zetsu. Haiden and Kakazu were arguing as usual, Kisame and Juzo seemed to be bragging to each other about something, Bakura was off to herself as usual, and Pain was seating in a chair, overlooking it all as Conan stood faithfully by his side. All in all, nothing was out of the ordinary until they all noticed the state that the three were in. It was met with silence, at first. But it was broken by Haiden, who was trying desperately to hold his laugh. What the hell happened to you guys? Got your ass kicked or something? Saying that, the Akatsuki member could no longer hold it in and bursted, laughing loudly. Ignoring the idiot, Kakazu spoke. What happened to you guys? A fight, obviously. Sasori responded rather rudely, dropping the unconscious Deidara on the floor harshly. Is that you, Sasori? Kisame scrutinized the redhead before grinning. My, you look a lot different than before. Was that other you just some puppet? None of your business. Sasori gritted from his teeth as he walked past all the members without another word. His main puppet was destroyed by Shisui and he was mad as hell, and had no time for questioning. Pain let Sasori go to cool his head but turned to Shin for a report. What happened? Did a group attack you three at your station? No, not a group. Shin responded, walking to stand before Pain. It was by one person, Shisui Uchiha. Not the Uchiha I expected, but, as usual, those Uchihas are pesky and in the way. He thought, mind going back to his encounter with Obito in the Mist Village. Because of him they had lost all control over the village and could no longer operate anywhere near it in case he caught wind of them. What did he do? I want a report. He came across the base from what seemed like above. Shin explained. I didn't notice it until he was already deep inside, learning of the reanimated shinobi we keep there. I eventually caught wind of him and activated hidden paper bombs to bring him to me, and after that, we engaged in combat. The next few words came out a bit reluctant, but he nevertheless said them. He defeated me in combat after I got careless, but this one, he gestured to the unconscious Deidara on the floor, blew up the side we were in, which caused the rest of the fighting to move outside, whereas three fought against him. And you guys lost, right? Haiden asked teasingly, grinning in amusement. Shin ignored him. We fought to a standstill until Deidara was hit by his legendary genjutsu, Koto Amatsukami. But that put him down for the count, and just as me and Sasori was about to finish him, someone hopped in and saved him. He was fast, but I was able to catch a bit of his face and he looked to be Itachi Uchiha. Seeing that he was done, Pain took in the information. No wonder they didn't give chase. Itachi was just as dangerous as Shisui. A shame, he could have been an excellent Akatsuki member. And what of the base? He didn't blow it up, did he? Nothing important. His reply didn't answer the question fully, but it did answer what was more important. Pain hummed slowly. He was satisfied with the report. They still had the reanimations and all members were still alive. The only problem was that Konoha has valuable information on both their firepower, a base of theirs, and three of its strongest fighting style and techniques. This was a problem. Speaking of members. Go get another cloak, Shin. Pain turned to Conan, saying her name once. She nodded and responded with a polite, yes. Before walking to Deidara, as Shin went to get another cloak. She activated her dance of the Shikigami when she reached him. It caused part of her hand to turn into a multitude of paper which picked the blonde up slowly. She then began to walk away to another part of the base to heal him. In the meantime, the other members began to talk amongst themselves once more. However, their topics weren't the same as before. Haiden tisked as his head went from side to side. Losing to one person when it's three of you. I could only imagine how that would feel. It'd feel familiar as all three are stronger than you, Haiden. And smarter. Haiden turned to glare at his partner. Shut the fuck up, Kakazu. no one asked you for your lousy opinion. It's a fact. He stated matter-of-factly. Haydn glowered at him, wishing he could just slice him up into tiny pieces. As they continued to bicker and the like while the conversation between Kisame and Juzo was a bit more civil. Another Konoha ninja, huh? Kisame mused, interest in the village as a whole skyrocketing. It seems the more we advance in our plans, the more they get involved. Heh, seems so. Juzo agreed as he sat on the rocky ground, running his hand across his sword in a slow but consistent motion. Honestly, we should just destroy their village if they become too much of a hassle. While I do agree that they're troublesome, I do think that keeping to the shadows is good for right now. Kisame disagrees with a small shake of the head. Maybe we should ambush their best ninja when they're on missions. They have too much firepower to simply invade, and you know how much the leader stresses to keep us alive. Then why don't we just add firepower ourselves? Juzo asked what seemed the most obvious question. The thing was that it wasn't an easy one to come by since there weren't as many S-class ninja who weren't loyal to a village. We have those reanimations, don't we? None of us know the shinobi there, but if they are protected as heavily as before, then they have to be valuable in terms of strength. Fair point. Kisame muttered, glancing at Pain briefly as he got up from his seat and left the room. But I've heard a little about the technique. Someone would have to be strong enough to control all of the reanimations at once, and I'm pretty sure none of us could do that. And even then, I'm not sure it would be enough. When he said that, he thought of all the notable ninja in the village. Obito Uchiha, Itachi Uchiha, Shursui Uchiha, Kakashi Hatake, Asuma Sarutobi, Shikaku Nara, Inoichi Yamanaka, Mike Guy, and many more. To him, it seemed that this village had better shinobi than any of the other 5 nations. They were just too dangerous to be certain that they could win in a full-scale battle. Well, whatever, Juzo said loudly as he shrugged, wanting to change the subject. He had no time for ifs and thinking of future possibilities. As long as I get to fight Jiraiya again, I'll be satisfied. Kisame chuckled. That's something I think we can agree on. Triple X. Konoha. The police force of Konoha was putting out the fire with low-level water jutsu as strong points of the building. They had Hyuga survey the building with their dojutsu, retrieving survivors, pointing out dead bodies, and steering clear of low structure points due the building wouldn't collapse. All the while, other policemen closed off the area to keep civilians away as well as genin. Because of this explosion, the meeting with the daimyo was pushed back until the next day. It caused Shikaku a bit of airleaf since he could now plan more for dealing with Danzo. However, that wasn't on his mind as he saw a bloodied Inoichi being put on a stretcher. It pained him to see it, but he remained stoic for appearance. He would definitely check on him later though. Shikaku-sama. A man said, bowing before him on one knee, catching his attention. The shinobi was a Hyuga who doubled as a medical ninja. We've managed to rescue 44 members of the division, confirm the deaths of 23, and the injuries of 10, including Inoichi-san. If there are any people unaccounted for, find them. I want their families to at least have their bodies. The Hyuga nodded and left to inform his superiors. Beside him, Anko was pissed. Really pissed. That fucking bastard. She seethed. I'm gonna wring that dustbag's neck when I get a hold of him. To think he'd go through such lengths. Izumi muttered, looking at the situation with disgusted eyes. Damn it, Kakashi lowered his head, ruffling his hair in hope of getting rid of the stress some way. I let Danzo's men in there. All these deaths are on me. All of them could clearly see that it was Danzo's men that caused the explosion to occur. It's be too much of a coincidence otherwise. Don't beat yourself over it, Kakashi, Jiraiya advised, knowing what that could do to a shinobi. You couldn't have known Danzo would use his own men to make sure information didn't get leaked. You are right, Master Jiraiya. His earlier movements were far too open. He turned to Kakashi. This is on all of us, Kakashi. We all know how prone to secrecy he is, but thought he slipped up and this is the result. For now, let's be more careful. I agree. Ganma said, taking a break from chewing on his sunbon. We'll be more careful moving on. Shikaku, do you think this can be proven? Shikaku shook his head. No, I don't think so. If we took a look at the bodies closest to the explosion, we saw that most of their bodily features were missing. If that's the case, then most likely, there'd be none of the bodily features left on the bodies that were at the epicenter of the explosion. Especially not what caused it. His reply was disheartening to the rest of them. They had no evidence that this could be Danzo, besides the obvious connection one could make from the coincidence of his men being captured. Danzo was smart. He had cut off all ways this could lead back to him. His men were dead, the files of this incident were destroyed in the explosion, some veterans members of the division were dead and the Inoichi was in a coma and Ibiki on life support, barely alive. This was troublesome. Let's not let these deaths be in vain. Shikaku said, turning to his group with resolute eyes. The meeting's off for a bit. Let's go back to the office and re-strategize. If Danzo wants to play dirty, then we have to as well. They all nodded and left to the office, letting the police force handle the situation. They needed to find a new way to get rid of Danzo. Removing him legally through evidence was no longer available. He'd have to use his authority as the pseudo-Hokage, something he didn't want, and put an execution order on him. Someway, Danzo had to pay for his crimes. Later that day, Shikaku received more headache-inducing information. This time, it wasn't about Danzo, it was about Sasuke. Sasuke had been apparently captured by some of Orochimaru's forces. Someone had seen the damage from the outside and reported in to police, causing them to investigate and find giant signs of struggle in the room. Then a platoon of patrols on the border were found with the surviving ones giving a description of each member. This confirmed that they were Orochimaru's lackeys. Damn it, why is this happening to me? Shikaku asked himself, sighing in exasperation. Someone seriously needed to step up to be Hokage because he was too old for this crap. It was one thing after another. It wasn't someone's in the village, then it was someone like Danzo, if it wasn't him it was Orochimaru, and if it wasn't him then it was that new organization, the Akatsuki. Honestly, this was beyond troublesome. He could definitely see the aversion to being Hokage, it was a job straight from hell. Inform my son, Shikamaru Nara, he started. He would need his group to remain focused on Danzo. Guy and Kurenai were on a mission. Shursui and Heiate were both hospitalized for separate reasons. And Itachi was on standby in case something happened. I want him to gather up all of his classmates and head out to rescue Sasuke. His assistant nodded, but before she could leave, the door flew open. Rin Noara has been captured by Orochimaru. The hospital's top floor is in shambles. His voice was shaky when he saw the top floor. Blood and corpses everywhere with broken windows, walls, and even the ceiling being torn apart. It was like a beast went through the place. Shikaku rose out of his seat, slamming his hands on the desk. They needed Rin and the hospital right now with all that was going on. This was a major setback. Add Rin to the mission and tell those genin to leave immediately. At his voice his assistant got scared and fled the room to follow orders as his gaze went to the male shinobi. I want the hospital to be moved to an underground facility. I want a platoon of Chunin to escort it until it reaches its destination. The man nodded and left in a hurry as Shikaku sat back in his seat. Because of his yelling his headache grew bigger into a dull ache. He badly needed a smoke with how his day was going so far. This is so troublesome. Chapter 37. Wait, what? Naruto yelled loudly. He had just gotten the news from Shikamaru that Sasuke had been kidnapped. He wasn't even woke before despite it being 12 in the afternoon and now he was dealing with this. Yeah, and we've been assigned a mission to go and get him. But also her, he pulled out a picture of Rin, one that Naruto recognized. It's that lady from the hospital. The one who was always nice to me and helped me when I got injured. He said internally, staring at the photo. Naruto? Are you okay? Kiba asked from behind Shikamaru, noticing how long he was staring at the photo. It was kinda weird. I know she's pretty, but she's out of your league. And age. And height. Shut up! Naruto yelled, breaking out of his mind at the mention of his short stature. Come on, Shikamaru. We'll go rescue them both. They need us. The genin declared boldly, stepping out of his house and not realizing his fatal mistake. Naruto, Shikamaru deadpanned. Put some clothes on. When he said that, Naruto chuckled nervously, looking down slowly to see that he only had his underwear on. And to add fuel on the fire, it had ramen all over it. I'll go put something on. When he came back out, Naruto was fresh and ready to go. Okay. Who's on this mission with us? It'll be what we have here plus Sakura, Ino, Shino, Hinata, Niji, and Tenten. When we get them, we'll leave immediately. Got all that? Shikamaru explained. So we're getting everyone, huh? Except Rock Lee. Choji said, finishing a bag of his favorite chips. That whole thing with Gaara would possibly have him injured for a while, if not indefinitely. Yeah, Shikamaru agreed before pulling out a small map of Konoha. He wanted to be sure everyone knew the entire village for what he was about to say next. We split up from here. It's 4 of us and we're missing 6 people. We need to leave as fast as possible to catch up, so, Naruto, he pointed to the Hyuga compound. Go there and get Hinata and Niji. Tell them it's for a mission and be quick about it. No horse playing. Naruto looked at the map for a bit longer before nodding and hopping off the roof, quickly making his way over. Shikamaru turned to face Kiba, pointing to where the Aburame clan was located. Kiba, you're the fastest. So you go and get Shino from his home. Tell him it's for an important mission. Alright. I'll meet up with you guys in a bit. He yelled as Akamaru barked from the top of his head. Kiba jumped off the roof and sped over to Shino's. Alright, it's just me and you left. You go and get Ino and then ask her where Sakura's house is to go and get her as well. While you do that, I'll go and get Tenten. I've got her location from the Hokage's assistant. Choji nodded and they both went to go and receive their teammates. Triple X. Izumi, calm down. Kakashi said, watching as the younger women fidgeted around, clutching her katana dangerously. It had been like that ever since they both received news that Rin and Sasuke had been captured by Orochimaru. We were busy with Danzo. We couldn't have stopped this. But I could've. She almost yelled out, turning to him. At least Sasuke's capture. If I had gone home instead of spending the night at Anko's, this wouldn't have happened. What really got to her was the fact that she was locking lips with his brother while he was fighting for his life. But it has, and there's no point in going about the what-ifs. Ganma said, leaning on the wall with his arms crossed. Shikako said he'd have people deal with it. We all need to be focused on Danzo. He's more dangerous than Orochimaru. He's threatening to become Hokage, and if we allow that to happen we all will be executed without question. His reasoning left her quiet and she lowered her head. She still felt bad that not only her friend could be dead but her surrogate little brother could as well. But Ganma was right. She needed to focus on Danzo for right now, and leave Orochimaru until this was finished. Anko, however, didn't care for his reasoning. Damn it. Let go of me. I'll kill that fucking snake. She yelled, squirming around in Jiraiya's grasp, trying to break free. She was going to find Orochimaru herself and pound him into the ground. But she stopped briefly upon hearing Jiraiya mutter, yes, keep squirming, this'll make an excellent chapter in my new book. She gritted her teeth in anger before smashing the back of her head against his nose, drawing blood. Let me go, you damn pervert. Her headbutt caused Jiraiya to let go as he held his now bleeding nose. But before Anko could go anywhere, Obito caught her and grabbed a hold of her, slightly lifting her of the ground. She turned and seethed to see it was him. Let me go, Red. Or you're next. She threatened, her eyes showing she'd go through with it. Calm down and listen to Ganma. His advice is right. He stated calmly. Anko was like a bomb when it came to her emotions, and if he didn't want to set her off, he had to choose his words carefully. Eat shit. You red-eyed bastard. Let me go. Kurenai, seeing Obito struggle with restraining her, went over and got in front of Anko. Sorry, but this is for your own good. When she said that, she put her friend on a genjutsu, putting her to sleep. She slumped in Obito's arms, going limp and snoring lightly. Her sleep calmed the room down considerably, as really, she was the only one that was actually making most of the noise. Asuma sighed, looking over at his secret lover in relief. Thanks, Kurenai. It would have been a matter of time before she escaped and did something rash. As he said this, Obito laid Anko on the couch softly before turning back to the group. He knew Sasuke would be captured but didn't account for Rin being a victim as well. This was certainly a troublesome addition. But he kept his composure. He trusted Rin to do something to get herself out of it, and Shikaku had sent a group to retrieve her. He just needed a little faith. He was on the assumption that he didn't want her dead. He had no reason to want that and wouldn't compromise his men to just capture them and not outright kill them. Kurenai sighed herself. I know, but she means well. It seems I've missed a lot while I was out on my mission. Could any of you tell me what I missed? Don't leave anything out. Ganma and Asuma were the ones who informed her of everything that happened so far. But as they did, they were unaware of something even worse coming to the forefront. XXX. Unknown location. Cold, brutal wind swept through the tundra like climate unforgivingly. Heavy snow fell on the already heavily snowed-on ground, showing the everlasting snowfall that plagued the area. It was constant and showed it would never let up. That's when a blackish, wide portal opened in the middle of the landscape. It glowed furiously, producing winds strong enough to where it started to collect the snow around it for miles. Then, in a bright flash of light, several figures shot out of the portal with blinding speeds. All before the portal went out of control and sputtered out of existence. A being with white, pale skin and light blue hair and a small, spiky ponytail stood up before the others. When he opened his eyes, it revealed to be a blue Rinnegan that flared to life and looked upon his onlookers. When he spoke, it was nothing short of pure confidence, arrogance, and above all else anger. You thought you'd be able to escape with that jutsu of yours, huh? Well, this is the end for all of you. Do you hear me, Sasuke Uchiha? The second man to stand, now named Sasuke, spoke himself. His voice also filled with confidence and spoke that he was ready for a fight. Urashiki Otsutsuki. You, just like Mama Shiki, seemed invincible at first glance. But your days are numbered and your weakness has been found. This is the end for you. The end for me, huh? The celestial being now named Urashiki muttered before spreading a fight-ready grin that caused Sasuke to tense up and prepare himself for battle. It was a good thing he did, as Urashiki rushed forward, splitting the wind in a massive shockwave. What utter rubbish! A red, chakra-fueled fishing rod materialized in his hand before shooting out at Sasuke with impressive speed. Sasuke's Sharingan sprang to life, giving him the perception to clearly see the projectile flying at him. It was all he needed. With speed surpassing the projectile, Sasuke dodged and raced forward, feeling the resonate boom from when the attack hit the ground. When he was in reach of the Otsutsuki, he slammed a ferocious kick to his gut, which sent him skidding along the snow. He didn't stay down long but wasn't quick enough to dodge the devastating punch that connected with him and sent the ground up in the sky from the shockwave alone. As the debris crumbled back to the ground, Sasuke skidded away from his handiwork, before coming to a halt a couple of meters away. As the snow-filled dust moved away, Sasuke could see he created a large crater with his attack, but his eyes weren't focused on it. They were focused on who was in it. Suddenly, a red, giant beam of energy shot high into the air, which made the landscape start to heat up at the intensity of it. Chakra hooks sprang from the beam, cutting through the air like butter as it made its way to Sasuke. The Uchiha could see the hooks coming, so he pulled out his sword and coated it with lightning chakra. All before he went on an absolute rampage, cutting through the projectiles with ease and efficiently, not once getting hit. Once he finished his onslaught, he found himself to be stuck in place, unable to move any further. That was before his body shot to where the crater was, and there he found that he was being pulled in by Yurashiki. Activating his own Rinnegan, he muttered 2 words. Almighty push. The jutsu allowed him to stay firmly in place, pushing against the pull as air pressure started to build from the force of the attack. Sasuke's cloak waved in the wind from the compressed air just in front of him. With his Sharingan, he could tell that the compressed air was about to expand and explode. Purple chakra sprang to life around him, a rib cage forming to protect him. The air finally exploded, its force momentarily able to stop the never-ending snow that plagued the area. It pushed snow and debris away while Sasuke was able to stay put despite being so close to it. His ribcage Susanoo was protecting him nicely. Feeling quite the pull on his chakra, Sasuke reined in his Susanoo. He wasn't at full strength and his chakra was about half from his previous fights. His attention was placed back on the fight when an angry voice rang out. You still defy me? I'll make your death long and painful. He sped forward, shockwaves forming from him splitting the air around him. Sasuke saw it all and let him come before they both engaged in fast-moving hand-to-hand combat. Lightning and divine chakra lighting up the landscape as they fought, destroying whatever was around. The tremors from their godly fight seemed to wake up one of the 3 other individuals on the ground. It was a teenage girl that was stirring awake from the tremors. Her eyes opened and she saw that both her teammates were knocked out. Boruto, Mitsuki, wake up. She said, shaking them both, almost shuddering from the cold melted snow that had seeped into her clothes from her laying in the snow. The both grunted, stirring awake before she turned her gaze forward to see blurs of her father and Yurashiki fighting. What's going on? What happened? Boruto asked, groggily moving about and trying to get to his feet. He was clearly disoriented as blood trailed down the side of his face. It caused his face to twitch involuntarily and twist from the pain. Memories started to rush to him. Memories of what happened in Konoha, and before he knew it, tears were running down from his eyes. Boruto. Sarada muttered in concern, looking at her teammate and gathering her chakra. When she gathered enough, she brought it from her hands and put it upside his head. When the healing started, he had unconsciously leaned into her touch. The gesture caused her face to turn red. Sarada, where are we? Mitsuki asked after waiting for their moment to conclude. He was an adamant shipper of the 2 after all. I don't know. She answered honestly after a slight pause. But Papa's fighting Yurashiki. She added, but with the tremors shaking the ground it was probably unnecessary. When she said that both teens turned to the fighting, Boruto a little more slower than Mitsuki. Boruto surprised Sarada when he suddenly grabbed her hand from the side of his face. Thanks for healing me, Sarada. He attempted to get up, swaying from side to side as he did. Let's go and help Mr. Sasuke. Sitting here won't help what's going on right now. As soon as he said that, he stumbled forward, landing a bit harshly on his knees. But his stubbornness didn't keep him down for long and he grunted as he tried to get up to his feet again. However, Mitsuki was the one to stop him this time. Don't, Boruto. We're all injured and we'll only get in Mr. Sasuke's way. He said critically, putting his arm in front of Boruto's path as they all watched the battle before them rage on. Boruto's response showed his agitation at the situation. Then what do you suppose we do? Sit here and let him fight on his own? The tone in his voice caused Sarada to interrupt harshly. We aren't saying that, Boruto. We'll be more hindrance than help if we go out there like this. Papa's stronger than the 3 of us combined and with us injured, even more so. Beside her the pale teen nodded. She's right, Boruto. There's even a chance of one US being turned into hostages, which could guarantee the victory of. Okay. I get it. Boruto interrupted, a bit annoyed if his voice were anything to go by. But it turned softer with his next sentence, almost as if he were in thought. I just hope he wins. I'm getting tired of fighting, you know. That was something they all could agree to. Back in the heat of the battle, Sasuke had just blocked a chakra-powered kick before slamming his own into the chest of Urashiki, knocking him back. Sasuke, using the space to breath a bit, weaved a single hand sign before aiming at his opponent. Fire style, Fireball Jutsu. The giant ball of flame engulfed the Otsutsuki's form, slamming into the earth viciously. It turned the snow landscape around as dry as it would be during a summer afternoon, but wind still swept snow across it. 30 seconds later, the Otsutsuki still hadn't risen and Sasuke couldn't help but wonder, was it over? But just as quickly as the thought came, it vanished. It was too easy, way too easy for an Otsutsuki. Regardless of rank, they had been troublesome to put down for good, and Sasuke's lack of opponent made him all the more suspicious and skeptical. His gesture had changed from its silent concentration, but the glint in his eyes told a story of how he thought. Before he could call out his opponent to fight, another voice rang out. "Papa, above you." With the warning issued, Sasuke turned his head up to see a red, glowing chakra in the shape of a fishing hook coming at him. By its speed alone, Sasuke knew he wouldn't dodge it in time fully. He had two choices. Risk being hit in a critical spot and all but give up the battle, or use one of his chakra-taxing moves to get out of the way. He made his choice. His Rinnegan glowed brightly as chakra surged it to life. Its piercing glare launched at Urashiki, and suddenly he was in midair. Urashiki gave a squawk in surprise as he noticed the two had switched places. That squawk was the only thing he uttered before his attack crashed into him, flooding the battlefield with debris. As Sasuke touched down, he couldn't help but silently thank whoever had warned him. From what he could see with his Sharingan, that attack was packed with tons of chakra which would have injured him like he assumed earlier. He let out a shaky breath. The move he just preformed caused his chakra to take a nosedive, and he already barely had just half of what he had normally. He needed to find some way to end this battle before Urashiki could transform, because if he did, it would all be over. Now the question was, how would he finish him? "You think you're good, don't you? That you're going to survive?" The questions came out slow, but from the tone it was clearly derogatory. Sasuke said nothing as his cloak danced in the sharp, cold wind behind him. All he did was narrow his eyes and enter his fighting stance, wanting to be ready for anything the Otsutsuki could pull out. "You aren't. This is your final resting place, you filthy mortal. You will die and rot, just like all of the 5 nations you also desperately tried to protect." At the mention of what happened, Sasuke was able to keep his expression devoid of any emotion, but in his eyes, what he felt was clearly on display. They were sad at the fact he couldn't do anything to stop what had happened, mad because of his inability to avenge what happened, and disappointment in himself. He couldn't find out what was going on with the Otsutsuki in time to stop what had happened, and for letting Kara get out of hand. He felt so many emotions but kept them all under check. He couldn't let him get to his head. It would make his bad situation become even worse. Seeing he wasn't taking the bait, Urashiki rushed forward at blinding speeds. Quickly, Sasuke channeled lightning in his hand before thrusting it forward, changing its shape into a blade. It struck home, slicing through the Otsutsuki's chest with ease as he tries to keep a groan of pain from coming out. "Now let's end this." His Rinnegan glared forward before bursting with chakra. Amaterasu. The rare black flames appeared from what seemed to be thin air. The unexpected and awful heat surrounded the Otsutsuki's body, and he screamed from the pain. Sasuke added even more chakra to the attack, feeding the black flames, and the agonizing scream only became louder. When it did, Sasuke stopped to think. How would he be screaming for that long? The flames would cause suffocation, or it should have burned his throat since it surrounded him. What exactly was going on? His thoughts were cut off when chakra hooks, once again, sailed through the air to get to him. He aimed his Chidori spear at the hooks, cutting through them with relative ease. His head swiveled when he saw Urashiki rushing behind him. Noting it was a diversion, his Susanoo burst to life to protect him from an incoming attack. Urashiki smirked as he touched the ribs is the Susanoo, taking away the chakra as his Rinnegan glowed. Sasuke grunted as his chakra pulled away from him. But before it all could leave, he exited through the back and jumping a safe distance away. It's the Rinnegan that's the problem. he realized internally. His mouth formed a grim line, knowing what he had just thought. I have no chance of winning, not the way that I am. But I can get Boruto and the others to safety, at the very least by then enough time to escape. Knowing what he was going to do, Sasuke ran to the others, breaking apart the earth underneath him. There's no running away. Urashiki bellowed, his Rinnegan glowing wildly. Planetary devastation. Large parts of the earth started to rise all around and even the slab underneath the Uchiha, but he knew the technique and acted quickly. Lightning cackled intensely in his palm before shooting in every direction around him. Chidori Super Stream. The intense lightning destroyed every floating slab of earth in his way as he speedily made his way to his charges. You aren't getting away. The long thread of the fishing rod sped towards Sasuke as he bounced around damaged floating rocks trying to dodge. The thread separated into 15ths, moving crazily in every direction, aiming to pierce the Uchiha. His eternal Mangekyo Sharingan blazed, enabling him to see and dodge each and every thread. Damn it, I'm getting too close to the center. He knew that if he got a bit more closer he would be caught definitely and wouldn't be able to escape the pull without pulling out the perfect Susanoo. He jumped onto the last rock and realized he was instantly surrounded by the tracking threads. Almighty push. Gravity shot at the threads threatening Sasuke, pushing them back and weakening them. What he didn't know was that was a distraction, and right under the floating slab was a smirking Urashiki. What a fool! Was his only thought. Almighty push. Sasuke stumbled and fell as the slab he stood upon rocketed forward all of a sudden, moving to the center of the large-scale technique. When Sasuke felt the tug in his body he knew he was at the point of no return as he smacked into the small planetoid before being covered in rocks that flew up after him. Mr. Sasuke! Boruto screamed, finally joining the battlefield with Sarada and Mitsuki in tow. He looked up in confused panic at the planetoid stopping just below it. Near the planetoid was a floating Urashiki, a confident grin across his face at his handiwork. His sharp, unrelenting gaze turned its way to Boruto and his team, his face never releasing its grin. Let him go! Boruto yelled, inching forward threateningly. You'll have to force me, unfortunately. How about I? His Jogan activated, glowing from the sheer power it possessed while, at the same time, his Kama started to spread across his right arm, forming seals until they reached his Jogan and surrounded his right eye. Boruto, stop! Sarada got in front of him, cutting him off. Don't provoke him. Get out of the way, Sarada. There's no other way. If we don't rescue Mr. Sasuke, we'll all die here. None of us can beat him. His gaze turned to Mitsuki who was already looking at him. Don't you agree, Mitsuki? Mitsuki turned away and regarded the question silently. Boruto was both right and wrong. None of them could defeat Urashiki without Sasuke, but rushing into the battle without a plan will get them killed regardless. He turned back to Boruto, smiling lightly. We should attack him, but cautiously. We can't win if we go in without a plan. The way he said it made the both of them calm down, but Sarada's was a lot more reluctant. His smile brightened as his voice took on a light teasing. My, you guys already sound like a married couple. Oi! Knock it off, database! Boruto yelled, his cheeks colored with a tinge of red. Sarada was in the same boat as him unfortunately. Why yeah! Listen to Boruto. Didn't you just disagree with him though? Shut up! A powerful gust of wind broke through their conversation. The one responsible had been Urashiki who had disgust all over his face, clearly not liking what he just seen. Disgusting mortals. Sarada gave him a wild smirk. You're right, I guess it's time to shut up. Behind her forehead protector, a seal opened and spread along her body. This is the seal of 100 healings. Her Mangekyo Sharingan flashed violently, its flower-like design spinning rapidly. Beside her Mitsuki activated his Sage mode. Light green energy oozed out of him as white snakes surrounded his form. The skin around his eyes darkened as a horn extended from his forehead. You three brats think you can beat me? Then come! Side by side, Team 7 rushed forward as Yurashiki flew down to meet them halfway. Seeing this, Sarada called out to Boruto. "Boruto, switch." She was referring to their formation where Boruto had been in the middle. They switched instantly, all the while Sarada was weaving hand signs. "I need wine style, guys." "Fire style, Uchiha Great Flame." Fire of extreme heat flew from her mouth, aiming to engulf the Otsutsuki, rushing them. At the same time, Boruto and Mitsuki went through the same hand signs. "Wind style, Immense Breakthrough." Both teams expelled a strong gust of wind, all of it combining with the fire to increase its damage just as it surrounded Yurashiki. There was a problem, however. That was that he had a Rinnegan. It glowed brightly as an invisible barrier formed around him, absorbing the jutsu and keeping him out of harm. Yurashiki grinned. They were truly fools. He was confident until he saw the three had surrounded him as he was still absorbing. Boruto to his right, Mitsuki to his left, and Sarada above. Forming chakra into himself, Yurashiki pushed them all back with gravity that surrounded him. Almighty push. The force of the attack caused the three teens to shoot back and crash into the ground. Each fall created craters about 50 meters wide and 3 meters deep, dust picked up by the gravity flying everywhere. Sarada grunted but was the first to make it to her feet. She started to form seals. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Okay. Slightly behind her, 2 copies appeared in a puff of smoke. All 3 Uchihas pulled out kunai with tags on them, ranging from explosive to smoke to normal. Absorbs this. The original yelled as all of them sent the kunai at the floating Otsutsuki. The kunai reached him and exploded just before him, creating a thick smokescreen. Sarada turned to her teammates. "Boruto, Mitsuki. You guys, okay?" To her right, Boruto coughed from the dust before responding. "Just fine." In the distance, Mitsuki was getting up and dusting himself off, which caused Sarada to let out a small breath of relief. "We aren't dead yet. He's coming," Mitsuki warned just before a strong gust of wind broke through the smokescreen. Yurashiki sped out, barely appearing as a blur to the three as he rushed. Sage Art, Raging Snake Strike. Cyan snakes filled with senjutsu rushed to meet Yurashiki as he sailed through the air at blinding speed. His senses blared and he compiled, twisting and turning in midair to dodge the many snakes, all the while preparing his own attack. Such good chakra. I think I'll take it for myself. He weaved past the last snake before materializing his fishing pole, sending the line at Mitsuki. Before it could reach, Sarada had stepped in between and stomped on the line with her enhanced strength. The earth shattered under her strength, but Sarada paid it no mind as she grabbed the line and tugged with all of her strength. It sent Yurashiki off his own path and on a crash course directly towards her. You really think you can stop me? He bellowed as chakra receivers shot from his open hand. I have to hold. She thought, preparing herself to feel the pain that would come. Striking Shadow Snake Assault. With the summoning jutsu used as a catalyst, multiple snakes appeared from the ground, each one catching and stopping the receivers in its tracks. Sarada turned slightly to look at a crouched Mitsuki who had his hands in the ground. Thanks, Mitsuki. He nodded in response and Sarada turned her full attention back to the Otsutsuki. Boruto, now. Appearing in a blur, Boruto held his grandpa's signature technique. Rasengan. He smashed the spinning ball of chakra into the face of Yurashiki, sending him flying back in a large heap which sent dust everywhere. Now guys, again. Sarada ordered and started to form seals. Her cheeks puffed up before she heaved. Fire style, Uchiha Great Flame. Wind style, Immense Breakthrough. Once again the wind combined with the fire sending searing heat that was hot enough to melt any moisture in the immediate area of it. Unlike the last time, the attack smashed into the god, sending the flames along the ground and melting the snow. Team 7 stayed on guard, not wanting to be caught off guard just in case the Otsutsuki got up. Let's go and rescue Master Sasuke. He isn't beaten but we may have a few minutes to go. Mitsuki said, and the other two agreed before they started to move towards the large planetoid. As they ran, Boruto brought up the question they were all thinking. How are we going to get up there? None of us can fly. The question stumped them all, probably the reason it wasn't voiced earlier. They kept running as all of them went into thought. What could they do to reach the planetoid when none of them could fly? Damn it! I can't think of anything. We have to do something before he gets up. Boruto thought, his face showing his agitation. I have a plan. Sarada stated, gaining the attention of her teammates, to which she started to explain. If I could get close, I think I could slip that thing apart. What? Boruto asked in confusion. He knew she was strong, really strong, but the planetoid was huge. There was also a chance that Yurashiki could come before they finished. Both of you boost me with wind style while I use my chakra in my legs to help. Her hand unconsciously went to rub her right eye. Then I'll try to bring out the Susanoo like Papa does. With my new eyes. Didn't you just gain them? Are you sure you'll be able to use it? Mitsuki's question was completely logical as always. Her response came out in an unsure tone. I don't know, to be honest. Her eyes lifted with determination. She knew what she had to do. But I have to try. It's risky, I know, but we don't have any other way, do we? The question was left unanswered as Boruto and Mitsuki synced their chakras together. They started to form the same seals at the same time. Sarada, get ready. Boruto said before muttering something else in a quiet time. And be careful. That was the last thing he said as both he and Mitsuki preformed the last seal together, their chakra peaking as one. Wind picked up around them, almost in a vortex before the two of them linked hands. This caused the wind to start forming in between the two as they separated slightly to let it. All of that happened right before a thunderous movement shook and shattered the earth underneath him. Sarada turned and looked in between her teammates, trying to see if she could locate Yurashiki. Guys, he's coming. You have to send me up, now. It's almost ready. Just a bit more. Boruto responded, his teeth gritting a hit as he aimed to concentrate on the technique. Sarada, you'll have to hold him off for a bit. If we lose focus or are hit, then the technique will disperse and we'll lose all the chakra we're building up. Mitsuki explained more calmly. Sarada nodded. Okay, I'll see what I can do. She responded before forming a seal. Immediately 2 puffs of smoke formed behind her to reveal themselves as clones of her. The original Sarada jumped over her teammates as her clones went around, all heading to meet Yurashiki halfway. I've got to keep my distance. I'm nowhere near the speed of Papa. She reasoned, forming seals with her clones. Yurashiki was beyond angry for these mortals had the gals to lay hands on him. And the fact that he actually felt it made him absolutely livid. He was going to kill them, no more playing around. He soared through the air aiming to cut the 3 of them down together. That was until he saw the Uchiha brat and her copies come in between, racing towards him. Do you think you have a chance against me alone? He demanded, his fishing rod forming in his hand. What type of fool are you? His demands were ignored as Sarada and her clones finished the seals, all yelling out their own respectable jutsu. Fire style, Crimson Flame. Wind style, Immense Whirlwind. Earth style, Wave of Earth. A blazing hot wave of fire spurted from Sarada's mouth just as one clone spit out an immense wave that took on a spiraling shape while the other clone spat out a wave of condensed earth. They all mixed together, creating a lava-like sludge that plunged its way to the celestial being. Did you forget I could absorb jutsu, girl? The being bellowed, his Rinnegan glowing viciously as it formed a chakra-absorbing barrier around him. The barrier absorbed the jutsu as he flew through it. No. She finally answered back when he cleared the attack. That's when he noticed that he was partially surrounded by her and her clones. But I knew you'd absorb it and fall for my trap. Both her and her clones formed a single seal. Coordinated light formation. Seals spread across the ground, latching onto the Otsutsuki, causing a circle of seals spreading underneath him. "What is this?" he demanded with gritting teeth, struggling to move from the technique. It was stopped when he heard a familiar technique. He was able to turn his head slightly to see behind him, which enabled him to see Sarada crouched and forming lightning in her right hand. It sounded like 1,000 chirping birds, and its name is the Chidori. She muttered, the technique finally finishing as it cackled wildly. She looked upon it with her Mangekyo, remembering a technique her master had copied during the last war. The Chidori sputtered as a dark hue formed over it before effectively turning black. Lightning style, Black Chidori. You should have gotten cocky and underestimated me. That's the undoing of your race as a whole, she said, arching forward a bit. She was getting ready to attack. Unfortunately, this isn't for you. Immediately after saying that, her two teammates appeared at her side, their jutsu in hand and ready to go. We're all ready, Sarada. Boruto confirmed, keeping an eye on Yurashiki. And it seems you are too. Why, you weren't going to attack, fool? Even he as confused at what they were doing. Of course not. I know you outclass me in every way if you can fight my papa, she explained. You have the Rinnegan as well, so you just absorb my attack anyway. Then what do you plan on doing? He asked to stall, secretly activating his Byakugan to view their movements. You'll see soon enough, she answered before turning to her teammates. Let's do this, guys. Both her teammates nodded and they all turned to run back, looking up at the planetoid. Cooperation technique. Mitsuki and Boruto yelled in sync behind Sarada, aiming to push her upwards. Wind style, Supreme Vortex. Their hands shot forward, causing the wind to condense shortly before spinning wildly and shooting Sarada forward, surprising her with its speed. Gallons of snow got thrown to the wayside from the wind as Yurashiki deactivated his Byakugan from the intensity of the chakra. It had also pushed Boruto and Mitsuki back several meters away, creating a sonic boom when the attack sent the Uchiha shooting through the air. Boruto grinned. It's all up to Sarada now. Zooming through the air, Sarada could tell with her enhanced perception that she had about 10 seconds to act. And act she did. Burning through her reserves, she pulsed chakra through both her Mangekyo simultaneously. Blood seeped down from her eyes as they strained to stay active from her inexperience. She suddenly felt immense pain all around her when crimson-red chakra formed around her. It felt like all the cells in her body were screaming in agony. But she pushed on and pulsed her chakra again, causing more blood to leak down her face before being healed by the 100 healings technique. It didn't heal her eyes, but it eased the pain. A skeletal arm and half a ribcage was formed on the side where she was holding her Chidori. She let out a shuddering breath before looking up just as her Chidori transferred into the Susanoo-o's skeletal hand. Susanoo, Black Chidori. With the combination of her Susanoo, Chidori, and strength from the 100 healings technique, she slammed into the planetoid, craving into it. The recoil bounced her back and she started to fall from the sky, her Susanoo, healing seal, and Chidori fading away while she fell unconscious. Her attack caused the cracking of half of the planetoid, but she hadn't been able to destroy the entire thing. She would have plummeted to the ground if not for the giant ethereal creature that had smashed its way out from the opening she had caused. This was the perfect Susanoo in all its glory, and the one inside controlling it was none other than a livid Sasuke Uchiha. The Susanoo caught Sarada with its giant hands before letting her inside of it to start giving her chakra. She did it. Mr. Sasuke's out. Boruto yelled upon seeing the giant glaring down. Mitsuki simply smiled. Uchihas really are full of surprises, aren't they? This had been the first time he had seen such a thing. Since Sarada had fallen unconscious, it caused her shadow clones to disperse, which released Yurashiki. He turned to see his planetoid destroyed and a giant humanoid ethereal being glaring down on him. Damn it! He cursed. He should have underestimated the three brats and went on ahead to kill them. He took to the sky, stopping right before the giant face of the perfect Susanoo. The Susanoo's glare met him on full force and he could feel the chakra pulsating from it. His confident smirk arose when he found something out. I'm gonna say that this is either a last resort technique or it takes away a lot of chakra. Otherwise, you would have started with this, no? Sasuke didn't respond verbally. Instead, he opted to do it physically. The Susanoo started to build up chakra into its left arm. While it did that, Sasuke from inside the Susanoo formed a single seal with his one hand. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 2 clones appeared beside him before breaking from the Chidori and making their way down to Boruto and Mitsuki. Mr. Sasuke's clones? Boruto asked when they both dropped to the ground before him and Mitsuki. They walked forward before placing a hand on the chest of the two. One of the clones spoke to explain the action. We're going to send some of our chakra to protect you for what's about to happen. Don't worry about Sarada. She'll be protected just fine inside my original Susanoo. What do you plan on doing? Boruto asked when the clones let go of the both of them. To finish this. The clones below dispersed when a lightning flash broke through the atmosphere, causing the sky to turn a bright blue which could be seen from hundreds of kilometers away. Wind tussled about relentless, sending the once snow-filled ground away and clearing up the sky from its once never-ending snowstorm. Yurashiki shook through the air uncontrollably. He was holding back. This had been the first time he had actually been surprised by anything these mortals could do. He wondered if this was how Mama Shiki had been defeated. From the use of the 6 paths chakra inside of him, his lightning turned dark. It's time to finish this. Sasuke stated from the inside of the Susanoo, memories of his life flashing before him. Memories of his time with his family, with the Konoha 12, and with Naruto. I guess it's time to join him. Be safe, Boruto, Sarada, and Mitsuki. And find a way back to the future. It's counting on you. His eyes opened as he glared forward. 6 paths, Almighty Chidori. His Susanoo raced forward, tearing through space with its speed alone. Its attack slammed into a surprised Yurashiki, causing a massive nuclear-like explosion which sent a rippling earthquake throughout the planet. Anything close to the epicenter was torn apart and destroyed without consequence. The explosion created more lightning flashes and dozens of tornadoes by its force alone, which sent a shockwave traveling even longer than the first lightning flash did. Triple X. Konoha. Even from Konoha the earth trembled violently. Hey, what's going on? Naruto demanded, his body rocking everywhere as he attempted to stay on balance. The full Sasuke rescue team was gathered and they were heading for the gate when the tremors reached and shook them. An earthquake. Kiba yelled, attempting to use chakra to stick himself to the ground. Shikamaru wasn't having any luck as he had fallen to the ground and had been unable to get back up with all the trembling. This day just gets worse and worse. Niji, however, had been able to get his feet to stick to the ground and keep his balance before activating his Byakugan. Is it an enemy attack? Tenten used a bow staff to keep herself firmly planted to the shaky ground, while beside her Choji fell to the ground and his chips falling to the ground. It looked like he was much more worried about the chips than what is happening. Ahead. Hinata's usual meek voice called out. In front of them was a large wave of wind which put a frightened look on her face. The large shockwave encompassed all of them, which shook the area even more, and this time sent them all sprawling to the ground. In other parts of the village things weren't much better, but the only one who hadn't reacted was Obito. Is that 6 paths chakra? Triple X. Back at sight of the explosion, it had calmed down considerably. The attack charred the ground viciously, barely leaving any traces of snow in the entire country. The once snow-filled landscape was now a charred, barren wasteland. Things 6 path chakra could do were surprising. Boruto groaned loudly as he woke, no longer feeling the cold wet snow underneath him. What happened? His was disoriented by the force of the attack, but luckily he had survived because of the chakra transferred from Sasuke to him. Without it he likely wouldn't have survived, most likely looking like the landscape around him. Wait, did Mitsuki survive? I'm fine, Boruto. I too received Master Sasuke's chakra. It seemed his friend had sensed what he was thinking and answered before he could ask. He always did that. Boruto nodded before giving himself a quick once-over. His clothes were in the same tatters as before, so nothing had changed from that, but his kama seal had receded, most likely from the impact. If himself and Mitsuki were fine, were Sarah's and Sasuke fine themselves? He should ask Mitsuki to see if he could sense them. I'll see what I can do, he said with a small smile, having already known what his best friend would ask. A small irritated frown took over his features. Could you stop that, database? It's creepy. Obviously he wasn't actually mad or anything, but the mind-reading thing was kinda creepy. The smile, however, never left the pale boy's face before he formed a seal. Saiyan chakra started to build up around him and he closed his eyes. He searched for even a minuscule amount of chakra. Anything that would give him a sign that the others were alive. But he got nothing, only the lingering chakra from Sasuke's attack remained in the area. Luckily, it didn't cloud his senses. Well? Boruto asked impatiently. Mitsuki had been sitting still, not saying a word, for almost a minute. I can't sense any of their chakras, not even Yaroshiki's. His voice was in a rather confusing tone. Even he didn't know exactly why he couldn't sense them. Did they all perish in the attack? He had to suppress a rare shudder at the thought. No, they were being well protected by the Susanoo. He had faith they had survived. He just had to find them. A strangled look crossed his face. You don't think? No, I don't. I think they're alive. We just have to find them is all. Mitsuki answered, cutting him off and deactivating Sage Mode. He might as well save his chakra. I hope you're right, Boruto admitted before taking off, running in the direction of the more charred parts of the ground while also calculating the trajectory of how they could have fallen out of sky. Mitsuki silently followed after him. Chapter 38. Is that Six Paths chakra? Obito muttered, eyes as wide as saucers. He knew that chakra, he had it in himself. That divine, almost suffocating feeling. There was nothing else it could have been. He almost hadn't recognized it because of the fact that he hadn't used any of his in so long. What's going on? Jiraiya demanded beside him, almost falling over from the widespread shockwave that just passed over. It's just one thing after another, Shikako commented as he fell over from the shockwave. The Chunin exams, Hiruzen's death, Tsunade's retrieval and refusing to become Hokage, Shisui being admitted to the hospital, Rin's capture, Sasuke's capture, Suna's peace treaty and the Akatsuki lurking in the background. That wasn't mentioning everything that was happening with Danzo and what he was doing. He'd growl in irritation if he wasn't so distracted by the shockwave. He probably had the most activity going on without there being a war. Just his luck, unfortunately. Fortunately, for paperwork's sake, no buildings in Konoha had fallen and no deaths had been reported. Shortly after the shockwave passed, Anko had woken up and was surprisingly chill. They all had expected her to go on her temper rampage again, which was why Asuma and Kakashi stood at the exits when she eyed them. She raised her hand up in mock surrender. I'm not going to do anything, okay? She looked to be telling the truth, so they both moved away from the doors, settling on the long couch on the other side of the room. Kakashi sighed when he sat down. I honestly have no idea where we go from here. Too much was going on at once. He didn't know if this was planned or just bad luck, but it seemed things happened one after another, each thing happening worse than the last and nothing ever being resolved. They hadn't solved anything that recently happened with the exception of the Chunin exams. And even then they lost a Hokage. I'll have Hyuga, Umbu and Hunter Nin check out where that came from and go investigate. The answer came from Shikaku, who was sitting thoughtfully. As I said before, I need you all to be here with me. We deal with one case at a time and Danzo is priority. He has the most power in the village. We only switch if Konoha is threatened directly. Don't bother, came Obito's voice. It gained the attention of the entire room. I'll go and investigate. Sensei? Izumi quietly questioned. What was he thinking? No, came Shikaku's reply almost immediately. I need you here. This situation has more than enough people working on it. Obito interrupted monotony, silencing Shikaku. We have most of Konoha's most talented in this very room. I have no doubt that you all can figure this out. Besides, he gave a lazy half shrug. I haven't contributed much anyway. What's the rush? This time it was Ganma. He looked particularly more grumpy, most likely because he dropped his sunban when the strange phenomenon occurred. You giving reasons to trying to leave as if whatever was happening was really important. Important enough for the Uchiha clan leader to leave. His eyes narrowed in slight suspicion, as did his voice. Almost as if you knew what happened. When he said that, something in Obito's gut hitched and seized. His face remained the same, however. He was used to keeping a poker face in tight situations. Shikaku was a bit more subtle with how he had his own suspicion. He looked him in the eyes with a question. Do you know about what just happened? Fortunately for him, Kurenai stepped in. What with all these passive-aggressive comments and looks? Are you suggesting that Obito had something to do with the phenomenons that occurred? Even to her it sounded stupid, and it seemed Ganma agreed. Of course not. I know he's one of our most loyal shinobi and works for the good of the village. I'm just questioning why he's pushing so hard to go. There has to be a reason, after all. What reason could that be was anybody's guess, and Obito hadn't said a single word since Ganma questioned him suspiciously. Shikaku sighed and stood from where he sat, almost whining from how much he had been moving recently. Obito, let's talk outside. Alone. His voice held finality, and Obito nodded and began following him, leaving silence in their wake. Well, before Anko spoke up. What do you think they're gonna talk about? Her question was to no one in particular, but Kakashi had been the one to speak up. The way his only show's eye narrowed was a dead giveaway of how he felt. I don't know. But it seems important. Really important. Outside with Shikaku and Obito, the two had walked a ways away. They had ended up by a closed store which had a dark green bench in front of it. They sat down together and Obito slid all the way to the opposite side of the bench. He knew what this was about, and every time they talked about it made him frustrated and emotional. And he didn't like to be neither. Is this something you know about? His eyes glanced sideways at the Uchiha as a single bead of sweat rolled down his brow. You know, from the future? Obito closed his eyes stiffly, his body twitching upright at the mere thought of his past. He had always thought of his past, always referred to it when he was about to make a decision, but that was different somehow. He never thought more of it than that, he was much too busy for it anyway. But when he sat down and thought about it, he could never fade the intense guilt that ate away at his self-made confidence. The confidence that told him that he should forget about all of that. The confidence that told him he knew what he was doing. The confidence that he could fix everyone's lives for the better on his own. When the only thing that kept him going was broken, he had always fallen into a quiet despair. Not really saying or doing anything. And that look he had. That empty, bottomless, almost painful look that spread across his features was something that he couldn't mask. That very face was showing now, but Shikaku had not been able to see it because he had turned away from him, binding from him. He honestly felt like a child. Obito took a calming, deep breath before opening his eyes and letting his body slacken. It hadn't been natural, but it was better to start. No, this is different. In fact, I'm pretty sure this entire situation didn't happen originally. Is that why you're interested in going to see what that was about? His brow furrowed only slightly. Most likely because he probably knew the answer to the question, but he could be wrong. Even when he had figured out that Obito was from the future and pried him for answers, he knew that Obito most likely hadn't given him everything he knew, and if he did, it could be entirely a lie or a half-truth. He didn't think Obito a traitor, but he, for the shinobi and clan head that he was, couldn't believe anything at face value. He wouldn't have survived as long as he had if he did. Yes, and I'll be going with or without your permission. Obito stated matter-of-factly, telling him exactly the first thing that had come to mind. He knew for a fact that he sensed Six Paths chakra and he intended on finding out what was going on. Shikaku nodded, turning a tired gaze to the ground. This past month had been more hectic than any excluding the wars. I knew that already. Though I'm not trying to stop you. I'm merely trying to get a read on the situation. His thoughtful gaze slipped towards Obito, who had significantly calmed down and his body loosened up. If something can shake our village like that, then I think it's worth me knowing about. I haven't felt a tremor like that since the Ninetales attack. That particular event still left a sore spot in Obito's side. He always imagined how life would be had he actually tried to save Minato and Kushina. How Naruto's life would be. Obito got up in a brusque manner, taking a small intake of breath. I've told you what you wanted to know. No reason to hold what I told you about me being from the future over my head. Shikaku grew a smug smirk. Sorry, you have it backwards. You didn't tell me where you were from. I figured it out. I'll be going. Give the others my goodbyes. Obito said curtly, using Kamui to teleport to where he could still feel the divine chakra. Shikaku looked on in silent fascination as Obito disappeared completely, chakra and all. Shikaku let out a sigh as he reached into his shinobi pants pocket and brought out a lighter. He lit a cigarette he had also brought out and took a considerate breath with it. He wasn't a smoker like Asuma, but he did occasionally, especially when he was stressed. Blowing a particularly large puff of smoke out, he decided he'd stay out for a bit and enjoy the fresh air. Triple X. Anything yet, Mitsuki? Boruto and Mitsuki had been running around, searching for any semblance of Sasuke or Sarada whilst hoping Urashiki wouldn't make a dreaded appearance. He hadn't known how long they'd been searching, but he wasn't ready to give up. Not when either of them could be in need of help. Releasing a seal, the pale boy's response was almost grim. No, nothing. Damn it. Boruto cursed, teeth gritting in frustration as he began moving hastily to another area, Mitsuki again following behind him. Try not to get frustrated. It'll make our search more difficult. Boruto growled in response but said nothing. Even with his hot-headedness, he knew Mitsuki was completely right and logical. The two were in a tense quiet until they arrived about 5 kilometers or so away from their last location. By that time Boruto had seemed to calm down considerably. So unlike most other Uzumakis. Mitsuki, can you search here? Yes. He responded with a nod. Saiyan Sage chakra bursted to life around him as he formed a single seal. Like usual, he focused his chakra to spreading across any organic life around him to sense the chakra within it and see what it was. Like the usual, he could sense the grass and trees around the area, but once again, no human chakra. He tended and closed his eyes as he went deeper to search underneath the ground. He was only speculating, but he needed to be thorough. He felt his chakra seep through the ground, running along in a smooth manner as to make sure that he didn't miss anything. Just focusing his chakra in the ground had made the range of which he could effectively search at the moment almost double, and he took full advantage. His eyes shot open wide when he found someone. I've got one of them. About 8 meters in the ground, from what I can tell. Watching as Mitsuki moved to crouch and touch the solid earth, he spoke. Do you know who it is? There's a risk it could be Urashiki. We don't want to risk that. Mitsuki shook his head. I'm sure it isn't him. This chakra feels less. He paused to search for an appropriate word. Refined. His chakra feel a bit more divinely, but that goes for his entire clan as a whole. He stood up and dusted himself off before forming multiple hand signs. Summoning Jutsu. With a puff of smoke, an injured Sarada appeared before them and Boruto immediately came to her aid. Oi, Sarada. Sarada, are you okay? Mitsuki held him back with a single arm, looking at him pointedly. Don't scream at her. That won't solve anything. His Saiyan chakra had all but faded out and he let it. It was honestly tiring to keep it active for as long as he did. It put a bit of stress on his body, but nothing too serious. Boruto seemed to calm down as he crouched softly to the ground. No, we just find Mr. Sasuke and we can go. We don't know if Yurashiki is still alive since Mr. Sasuke wasn't at his strongest. Before Mitsuki could say anything, Sarada coughed softly. Both went wide-eyed and Boruto went past Mitsuki to help her sit up. Sarada, are you okay? Black onyx orbs opened to meet deep blue ones. She coughed again, her gaze unfocused and wandered. It hadn't registered that anyone was in front of her. She's out of it, Mitsuki stated, seeing her gaze and analyzing it. Let's get going. We still have to find Master Sasuke, so you'll have to carry her. Boruto nodded and went forward to start picking her up. He brought her up to her feet before placing her on his back. He turned back to Mitsuki when he was sure was secure. Okay, let's get moving. We've got a lot of more ground to cover. They ran to another area of where the large explosion had taken place, albeit a lot more slowly because of Sarada's added weight and wanting to make sure they didn't aggravate any of her wounds. Their efforts were a bit in vain as Sarada had woken up from a deep gash on the side of her thigh that had been constantly rubbing up against the side of Boruto's leg. Mitsuki, isn't this far enough? He felt as if they'd passed 5 kilometers by now. However, before Mitsuki could respond, a light voice interrupted them. Boruto, slow down, will you? You're hurting my leg. Boruto tensed slightly as both he and Mitsuki turned to face their injured teammate, slowing down in the process. Mitsuki, who had been leading Boruto, had stopped and went around to help put her down to the ground softly. That had allowed him to see the deep gash that Boruto had apparently missed. How bad does that hurt? I'll be fine. The bleeding had already stopped, so it isn't too bad, and once I get some of my chakra back it'll be healed with no problem. She explained, getting up to where she was bending on one knee. It doesn't hurt too bad, though. Both her male teammates smiled in relief before Mitsuki spoke. Good. Sarada, do you have any idea where Master Sasuke could be? Me and Boruto have practically looked everywhere. Papa gave me a little of his chakra while I was inside his Susanoo. Her eyes squinted shut as she felt a tug on her chakra. The chakra given to her. She pointed in a direction. He's somewhere over there. That's out of the blast radius. Probably why we couldn't find him. He turned to Sarada and held out a hand for her to take. Come on, Sarada. Can you stand? I'll help her. Boruto offered. You go on ahead and find Mr. Sasuke. You have the best sensing capabilities after all. Yeah. Go ahead, Mitsuki. We'll catch up. Sarada agreed. Mitsuki nodded and stood. All right, I'll be going. He sped up in the direction Sarada pointed at, and sure enough it was out of the initial blast radius. Still looks like a hurricane passed through here though. Piles of debris littered the ground heavily. If he want a sensory need, he'd have a hard time finding Sasuke, if anything. Here seems far enough. He muttered, stopping to where he'd be able to do a full scan of his surroundings. Sage mode activated once more, causing him to groan in pain from the slight strain that had been placed on his body from his near-constant use of it. He was able to ignore it and focused on sensing for the chakra of Sasuke. It would let him know where he was and if he was alive. His eyes widened as they popped open once he found him. He immediately sprinted towards him to see him sprawled on his stomach, motionless. Master Sasuke. Crouching beside him, he immediately went to checking his vitals. Damn it, he muttered frustratingly. I can't tell what's wrong with him other than chakra exhaustion. He bent down more to where saw half of the Uchiha's face. Master Sasuke, can you hear me? Do anything if you can? Receiving no response, he cursed silently and put his ear to Sasuke's back, searching for a heartbeat. He found one, albeit small and barely hanging on. Luckily, the only medic on the team had shown up with Boruto carrying her on his back. Papa! She yelled upon seeing him, and once they got close she scrambled off of him to get to his side. Mitsuki, what happened? Boruto demanded, crouching down so see Sasuke better as Sarada began to try and give him medical attention. I don't know. He answered calmly. I've just found him, after all. Sarada. A small, rough voice called out, gaining the attention of Team 7. Sasuke's eyes slipped open, looking almost entirely devoid of life, or really anything at all. The look in his usual determined and steeled eyes had sent a shiver down all three of their spines. Papa, her voice was small, scared. I'm right here. You're going to be okay. I just need a bit of chakra and I can heal you. The corner of her eyes watered up as she looked at his state. Sarada, it's okay. Rest yourself. You've done well enough as is, don't push it. As he talked he paused in between multiple times because of the pain on his body as well as what he could sense coming. What everyone could. He was dying. He could feel life drain from the organs in his body at a slow but steady rate. He didn't know how long he had, so he wanted to impart a message. Mr. Sasuke, you can't give up. Boruto yelled, feeling a fire in himself start to burn at the very thought that the man that taught him was giving up on life. Mitsuki and I still have plenty of chakra. All we need to do is give it to Sarada and she can transfer into you to help. Boruto, activate your Byakugan. Sasuke says after a moment of pause. When he says this, Boruto's hand immediately and unconsciously went around his left eye, clutching it. Teammate, slowing down in all of the reanimations at once and I'm pretty small space. Would be enough. But it. I know. Sasuke interrupted, silencing him almost immediately. He knew that Boruto could barely control his for some reason as it could become active or reactive on a whim. None could figure out why, so the chakra point around that eye had been cut off unless Boruto purposely opened it back up. Then it would take a Hyuga to seal it back. Silently the blonde opened the chakra point, almost sighing in relief as the tension had been released from that side of his face. Scattered veins on the side of his eye popped up and his eyelid lifted to see the pale enhanced eye looking back with a penetrating glare. His eye was already looking at Sasuke, so he immediately saw the problem. And he flinched back viciously at the sight alone. Boruto, what do you see? What's going on? Sarada demanded, grabbing him by the collar. H's chakra network. I is destroyed. He stammered, seemingly not even registering how close his female teammate was. He didn't know much about the chakra network, but he knew that if ones were completely destroyed then they wouldn't live and would have no way to recover. What was the cause of it? Mitsuki asked slowly, eyeing Sarada who had loosened her grip on Boruto's clothing. His final attack. Boruto answered, trying to focus his left eye to the cause. It seemed to discharge all of the signals inside of his chakra network and destroy them almost entirely. It's a wonder how he's still breathing, much less talking. The more he talked, the more his voice faltered and he released a shaky breath to deactivate the Byakugan. He didn't want to see anymore because even more than that he saw how his organs were shutting down and how the last remaining chakra he possessed dimmed. This would be the end unless a miracle came. My eyes. Sasuke forced out. Sarada, I want you to take them. Her eyes widened, all types of emotion moving about her. She knew what he was referring to. The transfer of eyes between close family member the Uchiha of old used to practice. It was now forbidden and she was only told because Sasuke felt she was the right age and didn't want to hide the truth from her. He knew all too well what that could do to someone. But Papa Dash. Please. He interrupted her weak protest with his own. I know how you feel, but if my eyes fell into the wrong hands then we'll never win. My Rinnegan has a special jutsu, a time-space one. It will help you all go back to the future, but you'll need to awaken that turtle to guide you. Mitsuki glanced down as he took out the turtle from a seal attached to a scroll. As he did, Sasuke explained further. It's an artifact from the Otsutsuki clan and, with a lot of chakra, it can bring you back to our time. Mitsuki nodded and stored the time turtle back into the scroll. We'll keep it safe, sir. Thank you. His faltering gaze fell on his student. Boruto, keep training in the things I taught you and I'm certain you'll make it through. I want you to know that I think your father would be proud of the shinobi you are, and even in my absence, make sure to keep making him proud. And me. Tears filled his eyes as he slowly nodded. He couldn't talk. Sasuke then turned his gaze to his daughter, briefly watching her breaking down in front of him. Sarada, you know what to do after you take my eyes, don't you? I know how you feel, but it's for the best. So promise me you'll do it. Swallowing the spittle that builds up in her throat from her emotional breakdown, Sarada responded softly. I promise, Papa. He wanted her to set his body aflame. He had too many secrets in his body and was afraid that it could be used against someone later. It was for the best. Don't die. Live and rebuild our village. Triple X. Shikaku finally stepped back into their meeting room hours later from when Obito had set out. He had to calm the public down and gave orders directly to the police chief to tell citizens that they were safe and could travel freely throughout the village without worry. It had been a considerable effort, but he had managed to convince the public that they were safe. With that over, he called back his team and waited for each one of them to arrive before starting the discussion. Kurenai, you're new to this operation of ours, so I'll tell you our old plan. Then I'll tell you all the new one. He started evenly. Kurenai nodded dutifully. Go on. Our old plan had the involvement of Inoichi, Obito, and Ibiki. For different reasons, as you all know, they all are out of commission, so for obvious reason, the plan has to change accordingly as well. We plan to have Obito fake the idea of wanting to become Hokage to extend the meeting with the elders. Inoichi, who was going to be hidden away with Obito using a genjutsu on the room, would use his mind manipulation jutsu, a jutsu that gives him the ability to control a person's thoughts, on the daimyo. This would have been used to extend the meeting until a short break would be called. Our goal was to keep extending it until the next day so that we could take out Danzo at the heat of the night. He pauses and gauges her reaction, but she shows nothing but intense focus, so he continues. But that's changed with Obito's departure and Inoichi's hospitalization. Of course we could use another Yamanaka for the task, but we're already risking a lot in the first place. We don't someone who isn't 100% trustworthy. Here's our new and final plan, Jiraiya, you'll be doing what Obito would be. That only extends to you saying that you'd like the Hokage position, however. You won't be on any field duty. Kurenai, I'm glad you're here because we'll be needing your genjutsu skills to do what Obito would have done, but also what Inoichi would have done too. You'll have to both conceal yourself and control the daimyo to buy the time we need. During the break that'll most likely take place, I want you Kakashi, Anko, Izumi, and Asuma to eliminate any root members you see hanging around the building. We need to make sure he's thoroughly surrounded and try to convict him. If we can't achieve that, then we'll outright assassinate him. But this can only be achieved if we can prove that Danzo is our culprit. This all depends on you, Kurenai. She nodded and he continued. Kakashi, I'll have you lead this group here. I want you all decked out at Umbu outfits and ready before the meeting starts. Kakashi nodded. I'll have my own role in this and it'll be done by the same time you guys are doing yours. Remember this information and complete your side of this mission. If everyone does that, I'm sure everything will run smoothly. He finished as he regarded everyone. Sounds like a plan. Anko remarked, crossing her arms. It seemed everyone else was in agreement. But Kakashi had a question. What about Choza? Wasn't he a part of this mission? Shikaku nodded. He was, but I have him watching over the Chunin that are going to escort the nurse, doctors, and patients to an underground facility. Kakashi nodded at the information. We have a couple of hours till then, so you guys have some free time. Just be ready by 6 p.m. With that, each of the shinobi left. Some on their own and some with each other. They were in the final stretch now.